top officials killed in U.S.-Israeli attacks.
We are in the heart of Beirut. This is the third time the Israeli military has targeted an area outside Hezbollah's traditional strongholds.
Israel hits a residential building in downtown Beirut, killing at least 4 people and injuring several others.
GCC security is not only a regional security, it's a global security.
And Qatar's State Minister for Foreign Affairs tells Al Jazeera the world depends on security in the Gulf and diplomacy is the only viable solution. Three commercial ships have been hit by unidentified projectiles near the Strait of Hormuz. That's according to the UK Maritime Trade Operations Centre. As we are getting another emergency alert here in Doha for warning us of an incoming attack, possibly incoming Iranian missiles. So a warning for all to take shelter. Let me tell you more about what happened in the Gulf of Hormuz earlier. One of the ships hit near the waterway. It was a Thai cargo vessel. The Thai Navy says 20 crew members have been rescued and 3 are missing. The strait is a major international shipping route for oil and gas. Shortly after the war began, Iran's Revolutionary Guard said the waterway was closed. Israel and the U.S. have also carried out strikes in and around the strait. Now, the U.S. Central Command has released images of what President Trump says are 16 Iranian vessels that the U.S. military destroyed near the Strait of Hormuz. He's claimed without showing proof those ships were planning to lay mines. Now, right now, thousands of people have gathered in Iran's capital, Tehran, for the funerals of high-ranking military officials killed in recent U.S.-Israeli attacks. Iran's Revolutionary Guard has said it will continue to fight until the shadow of war is lifted over Iran. And Israel's war has spilled into Lebanon, targeting Hezbollah, an ally of Iran. An airstrike on a residential building killed 4 people in central Beirut. The Lebanese health ministry says more than 500 people have been killed since the conflict started. Well, we have correspondents around the world covering all the latest developments here in Doha, Ramallah in the occupied West Bank, the White House in Washington and Brussels. We begin with Zain Bazravi in Doha. Zain, we've just had another alert here in the last few minutes. We'll talk about the situation in the Gulf. But first, I wanted to find out more about what happened in the Strait of Hormuz. What do we know about these 3 incidents in the early hours of the morning?
Well, what we understand is this morning there were 3 different attacks on 3 separate ships in close succession to one another. One of them was a cargo vessel, one was a container ship, one was a bulk carrier. Those are usually those large empty vessels that carry mostly dry goods like seeds or crops of different kinds, coal. So all 3 of them came under attack around the same area, off the coast of Oman, off the coast of UAE. One of them was near Ras Al Khaimah. And one of the ships, the cargo vessel, did indeed catch fire. And they all happened with a similar profile. The MO was, as all the witnesses and crew reported, some kind of unidentified explosive projectile hit the ship. Now, it's not clear exactly what it was. No one's taken responsibility as yet, but we can point to timing and context here. Iran has said it would do whatever it took to shut the strait down. It is an economic pressure point for Iran, always has been. And they have said that they would do something like this. They would make sure that no vessels could go through if it came under attack. And that's what it's been doing for several weeks now. But now these attacks, the profile is shifting. These are getting more brazen. These are getting more direct and not just being stopped or stalled or veered off. And what is also interesting is it comes just a day after the U.S. government warned that Iran may put mines in the Strait of Hormuz and attacked boats that it said would be used for that purpose, simultaneously saying that there was no evidence that Iran had done something like this as yet. But the timing is certainly something that people assessing the threat, people watching what's happening in those waterways, will see as an escalation of a kind.
And Zain, attacks across the Gulf region continue. We've just had another alert here in Doha. There were several this morning. How are regional militaries managing this persistent pressure from Iran?
Well, at the moment, this was the 3rd one so far today in Doha, Qatar. The first ballistic missile threat at 8:13 a.m., then one about 4 hours later, and now the next one. They seem to be spaced out. Once again, there's a routine to it, but today seems to be a little busier than usual. We've had the all clear earlier this morning, then earlier this afternoon. Now another missile threat, and usually about 3 to 4 minutes after the alert goes off, you can hear the interceptions happening. We haven't heard anything yet, but we are watching for it. There was a thwarted drone attack in Amman. Bahrain said there were air raid sirens, and they thwarted a drone attack. Dubai International Airport, the largest airport in the world, international air travel, by that standard, it is the busiest, came under drone attack once again. Flights resumed fairly quickly, but it shows this ongoing threat. Bahrain also announced that it was moving aircraft away from Bahrain to other airports as a precautionary measure. So this pressure point tactic is not just in the waters of the Strait of Hormuz. Air traffic is also a pressure tactic that the country as big as Iran and is aggressive right now in its retaliation can continue to carry out pressure points on air traffic. Now, what are the countries in the region doing? At the moment, all they can do is react. Iran is in the driver's seat in terms of its retaliation, but the United States and Israel are in the driver's seat in terms of the initial aggression that was carried out that sparked all this.
All right, Zain, thank you for now. Again, an alert level elevated across the region, across Qatar at this hour. We'll come back to you for the latest on the situation here, of course. Zain Basravi in Doha. Let's head over to Washington, D.C. now and speak to Mike Hanna. Mike, first of all, what is the Trump administration saying about the situation in the Strait of Hormuz? Are they providing any evidence at all that the Iranians have been laying mines on the seabed of the strait?
Well, they've released video which purports to show attacks on Iranian vessels by the U.S. Navy. But once again, this is not entirely clear. The Pentagon says that it has destroyed 16 Iranian mine-laying vessels in recent hours. President Trump himself has put out a post on social media saying that the mines have not been laid as yet, but has warned Iran against laying any mines in the Strait of Hormuz. So, in a way, there's conflicting messages coming out of the Trump administration. Best example of this was the Energy Secretary saying that the U.S. Navy had escorted a tanker through the Strait of Hormuz. This was subsequently denied by the Trump administration. President Trump had promised a few days ago that U.S. vessels would escort tankers through the Strait of Hormuz, but this has simply not happened at this particular point. So, from the U.S., we're hearing that mine layers have been destroyed, but this days, once again, after the administration had said that every Iranian vessel had been completely obliterated. So we're getting these mixed messages coming out from the Trump administration, no real clarity as to exactly what the U.S. posture is in the Strait of Hormuz.
Mike, thank you very much. Mike Hanna in Washington, D.C. Israeli forces have been bombarding the Iranian capital city as the conflict escalates in the region. Overnight airstrikes hit near Tehran's Mehrabad airport. In earlier attacks, Israeli forces claimed they were targeting military command centers, but the Red Crescent says a residential building was hit and rescue teams have been digging through rubble searching for people. Now, despite the heavy U.S.-Israeli bombardment, many people in the Iranian capital are trying to get on with their lives. Ghessam is a shopkeeper at the Grand Bazaar in Tehran. He says his country has endured challenges throughout its history. Here's Ghessam's story in his own words.
We've been coming back to work at the bazaar for the past 2 to 3 days. Compared to the first day when the attacks began, the number of customers and the foot traffic has increased a bit. God willing, it will soon return to normal. But compared to what it was before, a lot has changed. Being here isn't very different from being at home. If there is going to be danger, it exists there and it exists here too. In the end, life has to go on, even in wartime conditions. We experienced the 8-year war with Iraq in the 1980s, so we are fully familiar with these conditions. I want the approach of our officials to change. Our people are very noble, just as you have seen throughout history, that groups and other countries carried out aggressions against Iran. We resolved things amongst ourselves. The point is that if the people sometimes have criticisms, they should not be treated like the enemy. In wartime conditions, we should not back down so easily. Economic stability, security, and everything else must be provided for the people.
Israel is waging war on two fronts, escalating tension in the region and increasing the risk of spillover conflicts. For 12 days, Israeli and U.S. forces have been bombing Iran. Those attacks have so far killed more than 1,300 people. And in Lebanon, attacks over the past 10 days have killed more than 570 people. Meanwhile, more than 700,000 are estimated to be internally displaced across the country. The latest Israeli attacks in Lebanon have killed more than a dozen people. This is the scene live in Beirut right now, the Lebanese capital, which has been hit multiple times Wednesday morning. As you can see, smoke over the sky of Beirut there. Al Jazeera's Zena Khada reports from the scene of an early morning strike on a residential building in Beirut.
In Baalbek, you're mentioning 7 people have been killed, mainly Syrian laborers. There was a strike in the town in Baalbek. That strike came without warning. Also in southern Lebanon, in the town of Shahabiye, 7 people killed. Also, that strike came in without warning. Shahabiye is south of the Litani River, an area where the Israeli military issued evacuation orders. But I think it's very important to point out that some families remain in those towns simply because they have nowhere to go. They say that they don't want to sleep in the streets. The government is struggling with a massive displacement crisis. Only 120,000 people are in shelters when there are 780,000 people displaced. So some strikes come without warning, others don't. And in the early hours of the morning, a strike again without warning here in the heart of Beirut. The strike came in without warning, just before dawn. And this is what people in Beirut woke up to after Israeli missiles hit an apartment in a residential building. A precision strike, that is how the Israeli military describes these attacks as it continues its campaign against Hezbollah and its allies. More often than not, the impact is felt by civilians.
My brother and I own the apartment on the 8th floor, and the apartment that was targeted was below us. They are saying those targeted belong to a certain party. We don't know. All I know is we are in shock.
Several deaths and injuries were reported as the war escalates. Already, hundreds have been killed, hundreds of thousands of others displaced. We are in the heart of Beirut. This is the 3rd time the Israeli military has targeted an area outside Hezbollah's traditional strongholds. We have to wear helmets because of falling glass and debris. Families were asleep when the missiles came in. The explosions caused damage throughout the neighborhood, worsening conditions for an already poor society.
We heard the first blast. I grabbed my wife and daughter and took them to another room, and then we heard a second blast.
Yet another traumatic incident for a population still reeling from multiple crises in recent years. The last war, only 2 years ago. And there's no end in sight to the latest confrontation. The Lebanese government is offering to direct talks with Israel. Israel says it will not negotiate and that the war will end when Hezbollah disarms. But Hezbollah says it won't surrender. Zena Khada, Al Jazeera, Beirut.
Israel has come under a barrage of Iranian missile attacks, triggering warning sirens in parts of the country. Air defense systems were activated in central and northern areas of Israel overnight. Israeli media reports all missiles fired from Iran were intercepted. Let's get an update with Nida Ibrahim, who's in Ramallah for us in the occupied West Bank. We heard in the last hour or so, I think, another wave of Iranian missiles towards Israel. Tell us about what's been happening there, Nida.
Yes, indeed. The alarm, the early warning came around 20 minutes ago, and then we heard just in the past few minutes loud blasts across central Israel. From here, from Ramallah, we were able to hear them. It's usually becoming louder, these sounds of explosions that potentially are a result of interception from from Israeli-fired missiles to intercept these Iranian missiles. Now, we've been looking at this period and this morning where we've seen some sort of a relative calm before this Iranian wave was launched. According to the Israelis, since the morning, the latest update from the Israeli ambulance service, people were getting injured as they were making their way to the shelters, which is a resulting of the state of panic that people have been feeling because of the limited or short amount of warning. This time they got an early warning, they had enough time to go to shelters, but generally the time between the alarm blasting and the rocket arriving is becoming shorter and shorter, and that's seen in some cases due to the Iranian attacks, not just on the radars here, but in the region, that is making it more difficult for Israel to be able to detect with precision these missiles before they make their way here. In general, in the past 24 hours, the Israeli authorities have been witnessing an uptick in these Iranian missiles. They were saying for the past few days that the number has decreased, but in the past day or so, we've seen the number rise to at least 20 missile launches from Iran.
So an uptick, as you say, the threat is clearly persistent, Nida. Every night, millions of Israelis are forced into bunkers. How are people coping? How is it affecting their daily lives?
Like, for example, let's talk about tonight. It was yet another sleepless night for Israelis who've had to go to shelters in intermittent periods of time, sometimes staying for 2 to 3 hours. This is something that the Israelis are not used to. Yes, this is a war on Iran, something that they've been talking about for decades that they wanted to do. There is a high support for this war when it comes to the Israeli polls. But at the same time, if this takes longer and if Iran is indeed interested in a war of attrition, this is something that the Israeli officials are trying to reassure the public about. Every day we see a new statement saying the war is achieving its goals, the war is going according to plans. Why? Because of these scenes that the Israelis are not used to, going to shelters day in and day out, going to fortified places. Let's talk about the effects on the economy. At least $3 billion of losses are affecting the economy every week because of the war. Even as the Israeli authorities try to ease restrictions a little bit by allowing gatherings, by trying to get people to go to certain businesses, we've seen how people who were in a construction site were killed in these cluster munitions that were fired by Iran. So this is something that is also worrying the authorities. How do they balance between keeping the public supportive of this war, behind this war and the government, and also not disrupt their lives in a way that they will want to end this war altogether? So it's a sensitive situation for millions and millions of Israelis as well as the Israeli government.
Nida, thank you for that. That's Al Jazeera's Nida Ibrahim reporting from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. Now, the European Union Commission president says the bloc is working on options to lower energy prices, but Ursula von der Leyen has warned that Russia stands to benefit from the ongoing war. This is what she told the European Parliament on Wednesday.
Yet in current crisis, some argue that we should abandon our long-term strategy and even go back to Russian fossil fuels. This would be a strategic blunder. It would make us more dependent, more vulnerable and weaker. So we should stay the course of our long-term strategy. We can be more pragmatic, we can be smart in its implementation, no question, but the direction of travel is the right one.
For more on this, let's bring in Nicholas Hack in Brussels. Nicholas, what more did